My name is Naomi, I'm 31 years old, and I was 37,000 feet over northern Ontario when my husband sent me the text that told me exactly how little 7 years of my life had been worth to him. Before I tell you what happened next, let me say this. He laughed at the woman walking in beside me when we arrived at the courthouse. He laughed loudly enough that his lawyer smirked and his mother lifted her chin. 40 minutes later, that same lawyer was gripping the edge of the table to keep himself upright, and the judge couldn't meet anyone's eyes. I'd been in Calgary all week closing out an audit, the kind of work my husband had always described as just shuffling numbers. He used that phrase whenever he wanted to cut me down quickly. It was efficient, I'll give him that. I'm a forensic accountant, a CPA, and I had spent 7 years using those same numbers errors to keep us solvent while he built his startup from a 2-bedroom condo office into a company that listed on the TSX 2 months ago. The day after the IPO, he handed me divorce papers over a dinner I had cooked. His message came in somewhere over the shield. Spoke to Crawford. Final offer is $12,000. Sign before mediation tomorrow or we go scorched earth. You don't want that. $12,000 Canadian. I'd paid our mortgage for 4 of the 7 years. I'd covered his business loans when the seed money ran dry. I'd eaten lunch at my desk for 2 years running so I could leave at 6 and still be the person who remembered the hydro bill and the condo fees and the quarterly tax installments he always forgot to set aside for. I closed the message without responding. Then I opened my laptop connected to the in-flight Wi-Fi and went back to the file I'd been quietly building for 3 weeks. He had been sloppy. People who have never been caught always are. They confuse confidence with care. He'd routed marital assets through 2 numbered Ontario companies, both registered in North York 6 weeks before he filed for divorce, then moved the proceeds offshore through a Cayman Islands law firm in tranches designed to sit just below the FinTrack reporting threshold. He'd Googled that threshold once and assumed that was enough. It wasn't. The same device authentication token appeared across both numbered companies, and a third account linked to a Toronto condo he'd purchased for someone else using money that had passed through our joint accounts. I was tracking a wire transfer through 2E847193 Ontario Inc. when the woman sitting beside me made a soft, terrible sound. Not a cry, more like pressure releasing from somewhere it shouldn't. I looked over. She'd gone the color of old wax. Her hands were trembling on the tray table. A glass of water had tipped against her elbow without her noticing. My grandmother was diabetic. I'd seen this before. I pressed the call button before I finished the thought. She needs orange juice right now, I told the flight attendant. Please hurry. The woman couldn't speak clearly. I guided the cup to her lips, kept my voice level, told her she was going to be fine. I meant it. Within a few minutes, the color came back to her face and she drew a long, steadying breath. I'm sorry, she said. Her voice, returning, was dry and exact, the voice of someone accustomed to being heard the first time. I thought I'd managed it this morning. You don't need to apologize, I handed her a second cup, just sit. Her briefcase had shifted during the commotion and a stack of documents had fanned across the floor. I crouched in the aisle to collect them. I couldn't help reading as I stacked. It's an occupational reflex, not nosiness. The documents were dense. A corporate trust restructuring analysis, the kind prepared for litigation, and buried in a liability reconciliation somewhere around page 40, there was an error. A clean, invisible error that anyone without my specific training would pass right over. Whoever prepared this, I said, settling back into my seat and pointing to the relevant column, has applied the wrong amortization rate to this asset class. It compounds across 3 fiscal years. The net effect is approximately $2.8 million in overstated liability. She looked at the page. Then she looked at me with an expression that wasn't quite surprise, more like reassessment. She retrieved her reading glasses and read it herself. I've had 3 senior partners review that binder, she said quietly. This is what I do, I offered my hand, Naomi. She shook it firmly. Constance, retired, going to see some old colleagues in the city. A pause. What takes you to Toronto? Divorce mediation, I said in the tone that contains an entire biography. She nodded once slowly and didn't press. The pilot announced our descent. I packed away the laptop and stared at the lights spreading below. Then my phone buzzed. A photo. A woman's hand resting on a dashboard, manicured, relaxed. On her wrist was my grandmother's gold bracelet, the one that had disappeared from my jewelry box 4 days earlier. The one my grandmother had pressed into my palm in a hospital room and said, "This is yours now, keep it close." Below the photo, a message. "He said you wouldn't notice for weeks, see you at baggage claim." I looked at the bracelet in the photo for a long time. The tears I might have expected didn't come. Something colder and more precise arrived in their place, which, when you are a forensic accountant, is considerably more dangerous than crying. She was at baggage claim in a designer coat, already speaking at a volume clearly intended for bystanders. She pushed an envelope against my chest. I let it fall to the floor. 12,000 is generous, she said, honestly. Tell my husband, I said quietly, that I won't be signing anything, and while you're passing messages, ask him about the receipt for that bracelet you're wearing. I filed a report with Toronto Police Services 3 days ago. Receiving stolen property is a criminal offense. If it crossed a provincial line, it becomes a federal matter. She went very still. I don't think he told you that part, I added. A calm voice from just behind me, Naomi, my car is outside. Constance was standing 3 feet away, entirely composed, resting both hands on her cane. Something about her, the stillness, the complete absence of urgency, made the woman take one small step backward. We walked out into the cool September air, and I breathed for the first time in what felt like hours. In the back of her car, my husband called, no greeting. Crawford Marsh is the most connected family law litigator in this province. He's had dinner with the judge on our file. The room has already been arranged, Naomi. Sign the papers or I will keep you in litigation until you have nothing left. I ended the call. He sounds like a man who is frightened, Constance said. He should be, he just doesn't know why yet. I walked her through the full file, the 2 numbered companies, the offshore routing through the Cayman Islands law firm, the Toronto condo titled in the name of 2847193 Ontario Inc., with a mortgage guarantee bearing my forged signature. I had never touched that document. The pressure pattern in my handwriting, the way I bear down on a downstroke, was entirely absent from the forgery. I had a side-by-side comparison ready. I had everything ready. Constance listened without interrupting. When I finished, she pointed to the wire transfer routing numbers. These transactions cross provincial and international lines. That elevates this well beyond family property law. He's exposed under the criminal code, fraud, forgery, and potentially the Income Tax Act if these transfers represent hidden income he didn't declare to the CRA. His lawyer is going to argue tomorrow that I accessed these records illegally, I said. He'll claim the Home Office was a protected commercial workspace, and that everything in my binder is inadmissible. Constance was quiet for a moment, then she said, "Let me review your files tonight, 7 a.m., the cafe across from the courthouse." I sat at the hotel desk until 4 in the morning building 2 identical binders, indexed, tabbed, every exhibit sourced and authenticated, every document cross-referenced to its origin. I made chain of custody notations on each page. When I finally closed the cover, the city outside was still dark, and I felt more alert than I had in 3 weeks. At 7, Constance was already at a corner table. She slid a single folded document across. Read the highlighted section. It was a Federal Court of Canada decision. The relevant passage held that an expectation of privacy in a home office is nullified when that space has been actively used to commit financial fraud affecting parties across provincial boundaries. My discovery of the records wasn't a privacy violation. It was the exposure of an ongoing federal offense. Present this after Crawford makes his argument, she said. Let him put it on the record first. Then you cite this precedent. If the judge refuses to apply binding federal authority in front of me, he will be committing a documented ethics violation. I looked at her across the table. In front of you, I said. She met my eyes and said nothing for a moment. I'll be in the gallery, she said simply. My husband and Crawford were already in the hallway outside the courtroom, standing with my mother-in-law and the woman from the airport. When I came through the doors with Constance beside me, my husband looked at her cane, at the careful way she moved, and laughed. Loud enough to carry. Did you bring your grandmother for moral support? He gestured at her. This is your legal strategy? Constance didn't look at him. She walked past, settled into the front row of the gallery, folded her hands over her cane, and waited. Crawford's motion to suppress was polished, confident, and mercifully brief. The evidence had been obtained without a court order from a protected commercial workspace. Fruit of the poisonous tree. The binder should be excluded entirely. He suggested the judge move to finalize on the submitted terms. The judge was nodding before Crawford finished. I stood up. I cited the federal court decision by name and docket number. I submitted a copy to the court. The judge read it. Read it again. Then he looked up at the gallery, at Constance. His expression shifted in a way that was quiet but total, like a light source being removed from a room. Could you please state your name for the record? He said toward the gallery. Constance rose. The Honorable Constance Fairweather, retired Justice of the Ontario Court of Appeal, current chair of the Law Society Tribunal. Crawford's hand found the table edge. The Law Society Tribunal is the body that disciplines lawyers in Ontario. Its chair has the authority to initiate proceedings that end careers. Crawford had spent 20 years building his reputation in this province. The woman my husband had just laughed at in the hallway held more authority over Crawford's future than any client he had ever represented. He sat down very slowly. The motion to suppress was denied. The binder was admitted in full. My husband was called to the stand. He hedged on the numbered companies. The judge directed him to answer plainly. He hedged on the condo. The judge's tone sharpened. Then I submitted Exhibit 22, a screenshot taken from that morning posted an hour before court. The woman at the airport pointing her phone at a white SUV at a dealership on Bloor Street, his silhouette visible in the background signing paperwork. The caption read, "He said the divorce money just freed up." Where did the funds for that vehicle originate? I asked. A bonus, he said, a business bonus. From which entity? Because your company's most recent filing on CEDAR indicates no executive bonuses were approved this quarter. The funds originated from 2847193 Ontario Inc., which received a transfer from your company's operating account that does not appear on the corporate tax return filed with the CRA. He stood up. I don't think he chose to. Something in him just rose. You have no idea what you're talking about. His voice had gone high and strange. You spent 7 years shuffling other people's numbers because you couldn't build anything yourself. That company is mine. I built it from nothing. The investors got their returns. Whatever was left was mine to take, and I took it, and I'm not going to sit in a witness box and be lectured by someone The gavel came down. Sit down, the judge said, and I will note for the record that what you just described constitutes an admission of willful diversion of corporate funds. Crawford stared at his legal pad. The injunction came quickly, all accounts frozen, domestic and offshore, the numbered companies frozen, the condo suspended. Under Ontario's Family Law Act, the judge ordered full equalization of net family property, legal costs, and additional punitive damages for deliberate concealment. He also directed that a certified copy of the transcript be forwarded to the CRA and to the Law Society. That last part was for Crawford. Everyone in the room understood. In the hallway, my husband found me near the elevators. He was very quiet. Naomi. His voice had nothing in it that I recognized. Crawford isn't returning my calls. Everything is frozen. If they lay charges, I need someone who knows the company's books to say this was a misunderstanding. You know things no one else does. You could. I don't create numbers, I said. I don't erase them. I follow them to where they lead. Yours led here. I got into the elevator. Constance was on the courthouse steps, her car already at the curb. She handed me an envelope. I've known the managing partner at Hargrove & Associates for nearly 20 years, she said. They've been looking for a forensic accounting partner. I sent your CV this morning with a brief note. They reviewed your public case history during the hearing. They'd like you to call before the end of the week. I opened the envelope. I read the compensation figure twice. Constance, I said. You had everything you needed before you boarded that flight, she said. You simply needed the space to use it. She smiled. Small, precise. Go build something of your own. 3 months later, I was in my office on the 32nd floor of a Bay Street tower when the email came. The criminal proceedings had been confirmed. Fraud over $5,000 under the Criminal Code, tax evasion under the Income Tax Act, 2 counts of forgery. The vehicle on Bloor Street had been held pending the asset freeze and never collected. My mother-in-law had sold the house in Oakville to help cover the legal bills. Crawford faced a hearing before the Law Society Tribunal in the spring. The bracelet was back on my wrist, exactly where my grandmother had always said it belonged. I had spent 7 years making myself smaller so someone else could feel larger. The morning I stopped doing that, I didn't need anyone to rescue me. I just needed to stop pretending that the numbers were lying when they'd been telling me the truth all along.